He thought it would be a joke. He thought he was buying a moment of cheap entertainment. He never imagined he was about to witness the kind of performance that could silence an entire room. The billionaire's name was Daniel Cross, the kind of man whose voice could hush a table without raising it. His money filled rooms before he did. His confidence filled whatever space was left. Tonight, he sat at the center of an exclusive restaurant called the Aurelia, where chandeliers glowed like liquid gold and every bottle of wine cost more than most people's monthly rent. Daniel leaned back in his chair, bored, restless, looking for something or someone to amuse him. That's when he noticed Leah, the young waitress gliding between tables. Her uniform was spotless, her posture perfect, but her eyes were somewhere far away. The kind of eyes that held stories no one ever asked to hear. "Hey," Daniel called, his tone too casual to be kind. "Play something." At first, Leah thought she misheard. She stood beside the grand piano near the wall, an ebony crown imperial polished to mirror brightness. It wasn't meant for waitresses. It was meant for the hired pianist who filled the room with background sound people pretended to appreciate. Daniel's friends chuckled. The sound was soft but sharp enough to cut. "Come on, Danny," one of them sneered. "Make her dance too." The laughter spread like spilled wine, quiet but staining everything it touched. Leah froze. The tray in her hands trembled. She could feel every gaze in the restaurant shift toward her. But something strange was happening inside her. Her fingers, those same fingers that carried plates and wiped tables, had started to twitch, as if remembering something long forgotten. The piano waited. 88 keys gleaming under soft light, silent but heavy with possibility. What no one in that room knew, not Daniel, not his friends, not even the pianist watching nervously from the corner, was that Leah had once lived her life behind those keys. Before life caught up, before debts and disappointment turned dreams into shifts and tips. 3 hours earlier, she had been invisible, and she preferred it that way. At the Aurelia, invisibility was a skill. It meant safety. It meant survival. The rich could sip their wine without ever having to meet her eyes. She moved through the dining room like a shadow, refilling glasses for people who spoke of yachts, galleries, and summer estates like grocery items. They didn't see her. They only saw what they ordered. But Leah saw everything, and she listened. To the soft notes drifting from the piano, to the shallow laughter that rose above them, to the world that had forgotten what grace sounded like. That evening, the pianist was playing Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. His fingers hit every note perfectly, but none of them lived. Leah knew that piece by heart. She had performed it once at Boston Conservatory, back when applause was her paycheck and the world still seemed fair. That was 2 years ago, before student loans, before rejection letters, before 1,000 little reminders that talent doesn't always pay the rent. "Miss," a sharp voice broke her thoughts. A woman wearing diamonds worth a down payment waved an empty champagne glass. "We've been waiting forever for refills." Leah smiled the way she'd practiced, polite, small, apologetic. "Of course, ma'am. I'll take care of that right away." The conservatory hadn't just taught her music. It had taught her control, how to stay composed when the world pressed down on her. Those lessons worked just as well here as they had on stage. As she refilled glasses, the pianist switched to Debussy's Clair de Lune, rushing the tempo, missing the breath between the notes that made the melody ache. Leah wanted to tell him to slow down, to let the music breathe. But in this life, waitresses didn't correct pianists. Leah, her manager, Carlos, appeared at her shoulder. His voice was low. "Table 7, Cross's party. Be careful," she didn't need the warning. She'd seen Daniel Cross before. He sat like a man auditioning for a throne, surrounded by 5 other men in dark suits, each eager to impress the one with the loudest laugh. Leah smoothed her apron, steadied her breath, and approached. Daniel was in the middle of a story. "So I told the board," he said, waving his fork. "Take my offer or watch me build a new company that buries yours." His friends erupted in forced laughter. The kind people use when they're not laughing at the joke but at the person who made it. Leah waited for the right moment, then asked softly, "How's everything this evening, gentlemen?" Daniel barely looked up. "Wine's warm. Fix it." "No, please." "No, thank you." "Just command." The bottle was perfectly chilled, but Leah pretended to adjust the ice anyway. Arguing would only make it worse. Then, as if the universe wanted to test her composure, the pianist began playing Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata and butchered it. He pounded the keys like a march, not a meditation. The piece that had once sounded like moonlight now felt like footsteps in mud. Leah's hand froze mid-motion. Her eyes betrayed her for half a second, just long enough for Daniel to notice. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" he asked, voice smooth and dangerous. "You look like someone stepped on your cat." His friends turned toward her, grinning like spectators waiting for blood. "Nothing's wrong, sir," Leah said evenly, forcing her voice calm. But Daniel wasn't done. He'd seen the flicker in her eyes, the one thing she hadn't meant to reveal. He followed her gaze to the piano. "You a music lover?" he asked, smirking. "Tell me, what do you think of our entertainment tonight?" Leah hesitated. Every instinct told her to stay invisible, to smile, apologize, and walk away. But then came another wrong note. Then another. The pianist was slaughtering Beethoven. "He's enthusiastic," she finally said. Daniel's laughter was sharp enough to draw stares. "Did you hear that, boys? Our waitress here's a music critic." Cruel laughter followed, bouncing off crystal glasses and marble floors. Other diners started watching. The show had begun, and Leah was the unwilling star. Daniel's laughter cut through the restaurant like a blade. The laughter of his friends followed, low, mocking, the kind that drew eyes from nearby tables. Leah's face remained calm, but inside, her stomach twisted into knots. She had become the evening's entertainment. Daniel leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Tell us, Miss Expert," he said, his smile sharp and cold. "What's wrong with our pianist?" "Don't be shy now," Leah hesitated. Every instinct told her to retreat. Keep your job. Keep quiet. Keep invisible. But invisibility had a cost. It meant swallowing every insult. It meant pretending the music wasn't being murdered before her. Finally, she said softly, "He's missing the feeling." The piece is supposed to whisper, not shout. The laughter stopped for half a second. Daniel tilted his head like a cat noticing movement. "Missing the feeling," he repeated. "So you do know music," he smirked, looking at his friends. "You hear that, boys? Our waitress thinks she knows better than a professional." Leah opened her mouth to explain, but Daniel didn't give her the chance. "Tell you what," he said, eyes glinting with mischief. "Why don't you show us how it's done?" For a moment, the world went quiet. Even the clinking of glasses seemed to freeze midair. Leah blinked, unsure she'd heard right. "Excuse me?" Daniel gestured toward the grand piano. "Go on, play something. Let's see if you can back up those opinions of yours." "I can't," she started, but he interrupted, voice rising. "What's the matter? You've got opinions but no skill?" The crowd began to murmur. The pianist looked away, uncomfortable. Carlos, the manager, froze near the bar, his expression torn between horror and helplessness. Leah's hands tightened around the tray. Her mind raced. Refuse, and she'd prove his point. Accept and risk everything. Her job, her dignity, her secret past. Daniel leaned back, smug. "That's what I thought," he said. "All talk. No talent." Something inside her snapped. She had worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to be laughed out of her own art. She had spent a lifetime behind those keys, chasing perfection until her fingers bled. She had poured her heart into a dream that life had stolen. And now here was this man, this spoiled billionaire, mocking everything she once was. Leah took a breath. The sound was steady, deliberate. "Fine," she said quietly. The laughter faltered. "What did you say?" Daniel asked. "I said fine. You want to hear music? You'll hear it." For the first time that night, Daniel didn't have a comeback. His mouth hung open for half a second before he grinned again, trying to recover. "Well then," he said, gesturing grandly to the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, our lovely waitress will be performing for us tonight." The restaurant erupted in nervous laughter. A few diners looked uncomfortable, but none stepped in. "Not yet." Leah set her tray on an empty table and walked toward the piano. Each step echoed in the sudden hush. Her uniform felt heavy, her heart beat louder than the whispers around her. Daniel's voice followed her like a shadow. "Better be good, sweetheart. That thing costs more than your apartment." Leah didn't look back. When she reached the piano, she paused for a second. Her reflection stared back from the glossy black lid, a version of herself she hadn't seen in years. Not Leah the waitress. Leah the pianist. Leah the artist. She pulled the bench out, adjusting it with precision. The small metallic click echoed through the silence. She brushed aside the sheet music, her fingers trembling slightly as they hovered above the keys. Daniel called out, "Don't be nervous. You can always go back to refilling drinks if it's too much." Leah closed her eyes. For a moment, the world disappeared. The smell of perfume, the clinking of glasses, the cruel laughter, all of it faded into silence. In its place came a memory. The stage at Boston Conservatory. The warm lights. The applause. The sound of her parents cheering from the front row. When she opened her eyes again, they were steady. Her hands fell onto the keys. The first notes that filled the air weren't timid or clumsy. They were deep, rich, and alive. Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, the same piece that had defined her senior recital, poured from the instrument with a force that demanded silence. Every conversation in the restaurant died. The laughter stopped. Even Daniel froze, his smirk fading as the music grew. Leah's fingers moved like water, each motion purposeful and sure. Every note carried power. Every chord was a strike of defiance. The sound wrapped around the room, turning marble and crystal into her concert hall. Someone whispered, "My God, she's incredible." The pianist in the corner stood, his mouth open. He knew what he was hearing. This wasn't luck or memory. This was mastery. Daniel's jaw tightened. "It's just a trick," he muttered. Anyone can memorize a few notes. But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true. Leah wasn't playing like someone showing off. She was performing like someone reclaiming her life. The music swelled, pulling everyone into its orbit. Each phrase spoke of pain and persistence, of dreams lost and rediscovered. The billionaire who had mocked her minutes ago sat silent, his fingers gripping the edge of the table. His friends didn't dare laugh now. Leah's world had shrunk to the keys before her. She felt the music rising through her veins, every heartbeat syncing with the rhythm. For the first time in years, she wasn't pretending. She was home. As the music soared, Daniel realized with dawning horror that the woman he'd tried to humiliate wasn't just good, she was extraordinary. The predator had woken a storm, and every note she played was a reckoning. The crescendo built like a gathering wave, powerful and unstoppable, until the air itself seemed to tremble. The room held its breath. Leah struck the final chord. It rang through the restaurant, rich and resonant, fading slowly into silence. For a long moment, no one moved. Then from somewhere near the bar, a single pair of hands began to clap. The sound grew. One, then two, then dozens, until the entire restaurant was on its feet. Applauding not a waitress, but an artist, Daniel Cross sat motionless, his eyes wide, his face drained of color. Leah stood, breathing hard but steady, her hands resting gently on the keys. She looked out at the room full of people who'd seen her as invisible just hours ago. No one was laughing now. He had taken back everything they'd tried to take from her with nothing but her music, and she wasn't finished yet. The applause thundered through the restaurant, filling every corner like an ocean of sound. Leah stood still, her breath shallow, her heart pounding. She wasn't sure whether to bow or run. For a moment, she simply stared at the piano, dazed by what she had just done. Daniel Cross sat frozen in his chair, eyes locked on her as if he were seeing her for the first time. The arrogance that had once filled his every movement was gone, replaced by something fragile, something unsteady. His friends were silent too. Their laughter had died somewhere between the second and third movement of Rachmaninoff, replaced by awe and a hint of shame. Leah exhaled slowly and turned away from the piano. The applause still roared, but now it wasn't just noise, it was vindication. For the first time in years, she was being seen not as a server, but as an artist. She gave a small nod of gratitude, and the clapping intensified. The woman who had complained about champagne refills was crying openly. The pianist who'd been hired for the night approached quietly, his eyes filled with respect. "That was—" he started, but words failed him. Leah smiled softly. "It's been a long time," she said. Daniel's voice broke through the applause. "That's enough." The room went still again. His tone was shaky, defensive. He stood, trying to regain the composure that had slipped from his grasp. "Very nice trick," he said, forcing a smile. "But anyone can learn a few songs if they have enough free time." No one laughed. Not this time. A man at a nearby table turned toward him. That wasn't a trick. That was Rachmaninoff. The recognition rippled through the room. A few nodded, whispering the composer's name like a revelation. Rachmaninoff. The kind of music that demanded a lifetime of training and devotion. The kind no one learned in their free time. Daniel's smile faltered. "You're all exaggerating," he muttered. But his friends wouldn't meet his eyes. One of them, a silver-haired investor named Patrick, cleared his throat. "Daniel, that wasn't just good. That was world-class." Leah stood quietly, watching him unravel. "You can stop pretending," Daniel said, his voice rising. "You're not some kind of prodigy. You're a waitress." She met his eyes for the first time. Calm. Certain. "I was," she said. "Until tonight." Her words hung in the air, heavy and final. The crowd murmured again, this time not with gossip but admiration. Something had shifted. The power in the room was no longer his. Daniel's face flushed red. He looked around for support, but there was none. His friends avoided him. Even the waitstaff kept their distance. Leah could have walked away then. She had already won, but something inside her wanted to end this properly. "I didn't start tonight to prove anything," she said, her voice clear and steady. "But I won't let anyone tell me what I'm worth again." Her words carried across the restaurant, cutting through the silence. Every person felt the weight of them. An older woman near the back stood, her pearl necklace glinting under the chandeliers. "Young lady," she called, where did you study?" Leah hesitated for just a second, then answered, "Riverside Conservatory. Class of 2022. Gasps scattered through the room. It was one of the top music schools in the country. The woman nodded, her expression softening. "I knew it," she said. "That level of control doesn't come without years of training." Daniel sank back into his seat. "You think this changes anything?" He muttered under his breath. "You'll still be clearing tables tomorrow." Leah turned to him. "Maybe, but you'll still be the man who had to be taught humility by a waitress." The words landed like a strike. No one dared breathe. Then someone laughed, not mockingly, but with the kind of relief that comes after justice is done. The laughter spread. Not cruel this time, but honest. Daniel's arrogance collapsed completely under it. His shoulders sagged. His jaw clenched. From the far end of the restaurant, Carlos stepped forward, his voice low but firm. "Leah," he said, "you've just reminded all of us why we love this place. You don't have to serve another table tonight." Leah nodded slowly, gratitude glinting in her eyes. The woman with pearls stepped closer. "I'm Evelyn Hart," she said. "I run the Hart Foundation for the Arts. We fund young musicians. I'd like to speak with you." The words barely registered at first. Leah's mind was still half on the piano, half on the moment that had changed her life. "Thank you," she whispered. Evelyn smiled. "Don't thank me yet. Let's see what you can do with a proper stage." The crowd broke into fresh applause. This time it wasn't polite. It was thunderous, joyous, genuine. Daniel Cross remained seated, his empire of pride reduced to silence. He looked at Leah, trying to find something cruel to say, but there was nothing left. For the first time in his life, he was the one being looked down upon. Leah turned away from him and placed her hand once more on the piano's smooth surface, the instrument that had waited for her all this time. She whispered softly, "Thank you." Then she walked off the stage, not as a waitress, but as the woman she had always been. The night wasn't over. This was only the beginning. As Leah stepped away from the piano, the applause still rippling through the room like an aftershock, something inside her shifted. The years of doubt, of invisible labor and quiet humiliation seemed to peel away layer by layer. She could feel the weight leaving her chest, replaced by a steady warmth, not pride exactly, but peace. Daniel Cross sat stiffly, hands pressed flat against the table as though trying to steady the ground beneath him. The people who had come to laugh at his jokes now stared at him with thinly disguised contempt. Their hero had turned into the fool of his own story. Leah's co-workers watched from the sidelines, wide-eyed. For months they had seen her as the quiet one, the one who always said yes, sir, and right away. None of them had known she carried this kind of fire inside her. Evelyn Hart, the elegant woman from the back of the room, was now speaking softly to Carlos. He nodded quickly and hurried toward Leah. "Leah," he said, "Mrs. Hart wants a word." Leah turned. Evelyn stood with perfect posture, her eyes bright and curious. "My dear," she said warmly, "you have no idea what you just did, do you?" Leah blinked, unsure how to answer. "I just played," she said quietly. Evelyn smiled. "You didn't just play. You reminded every person here what real talent sounds like." She paused, studying Leah's face. "You studied at Riverside, didn't you?" Leah nodded almost shyly. "I thought so," Evelyn said. "I've heard enough of your alumni to recognize their touch. You played like someone who's lived every note." Behind them, the crowd began to disperse, but the whispers lingered. The billionaire's name traveled in hushed tones through the dining room, accompanied by phrases like humiliated and served him right. Daniel stayed seated, his face pale. He looked around, desperate for a way to recover, but there was none. Every man at his table had abandoned him, some with pitying glances, others with the quiet satisfaction that comes from seeing arrogance crumble. Leah caught his eye for a brief moment. He looked smaller now, not in stature but in spirit. She could have turned away, but she didn't. Instead, she walked back toward him, her steps measured and calm. Daniel straightened his jacket as if that could restore his authority. "You made quite the scene," he said, his voice thin. Leah's tone was gentle but unflinching. "You made it first," she said. "I just finished it." For the first time that night, Daniel didn't have a response. He looked down at the table, then away, his reflection trembling in the polished surface of his wine glass. Leah didn't linger. She turned back to Evelyn, who was waiting patiently by the door. "Mrs. Hart," she said softly, "you mentioned the foundation?" "Yes," Evelyn replied. "We sponsor musicians who've been forced off their path, people with talent but without opportunity. I'd like to help you get back where you belong." Leah's breath caught in her throat. "Are you serious?" "As serious as I've ever been," Evelyn said with a kind smile. "Your name deserves to be on a program, not a menu." Leah didn't know whether to laugh or cry. All she could manage was a quiet, "Thank you." "You can thank me after your first concert," Evelyn replied. "Call my office tomorrow. We'll make arrangements." Carlos stepped closer, still looking stunned. "Leah, whatever happens next, you've always got a place here." She smiled at him. "Thank you, Carlos. But I think tonight showed me where I'm supposed to be." He nodded slowly, pride softening his voice. "Go make them listen." Across the room, Daniel finally rose from his seat, his movement stiff and mechanical. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a card. "Here," he said quietly, extending it toward her. "I invest in talent. If you ever need support—" Leah looked at the card for a moment before shaking her head. "You already gave me something better than support," she said. "You reminded me who I am." He froze, the weight of her words cutting deeper than any insult could. I'm sorry," he stammered. Leah's eyes softened. "Then learn from it." He nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and walked out of the restaurant, the sound of his shoes echoing in the heavy silence he left behind. When the door closed, Leah turned back toward the piano one last time. She touched its cool surface gently, as if saying goodbye to an old friend. Around her the staff had gathered, cooks, hosts, servers, all watching her with admiration. "You were amazing," one whispered. Leah smiled faintly. "No," she said, her voice steady. "The music was." That night, long after the last guest had left and the chandeliers had dimmed, Leah stayed behind. She sat at the piano again, alone this time. No audience, no applause, no billionaire watching. Just her, the keys, and the quiet pulse of the city beyond the glass walls. Her fingers brushed the ivory, and a single note rang out. Soft, pure, certain. She closed her eyes and played again, not for anyone else this time, but for herself. It was the sound of a door opening, the sound of a life beginning again. 6 months later, the lights of the grand Aria Hall shimmered across the marble lobby. It was opening night of a concert series called Rising Voices, funded by the Hart Foundation. The posters outside showed a young woman in a deep burgundy gown, her hands resting on a piano as if it were part of her soul. The name beneath the image read, Leah Morgan. Inside, the hall buzzed with anticipation. Critics, musicians, and patrons filled every seat. Leah stood backstage, her palms pressed against the piano's cool edge, breathing in slow, steady rhythm. The scent of polished wood and velvet curtains felt familiar now, like coming home after a long exile. Evelyn Hart appeared beside her, elegant as always. You ready, my dear? She asked softly. Leah smiled. I've been ready my whole life. The house lights dimmed. The audience quieted. The announcer's voice carried across the hall. Please welcome Leah Morgan performing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. The applause washed over her like a wave. Leah stepped into the light. The same model piano awaited her, the crown imperial gleaming under gold stage lamps. Her gown shimmered as she sat, poised but unpretentious, every movement calm and deliberate. When she touched the first keys, the world dissolved again. The music filled the space, powerful yet tender, wrapping every listener in the same spell she had once cast in that restaurant. But this time it wasn't defiance. It was freedom. Each note carried fragments of her journey. The clatter of dishes, the sting of mockery, the echo of applause in a dining room that had never meant to be a stage. Now those memories transformed into sound, rising and falling like tides. In the third row sat her parents, holding hands tightly. Her mother's eyes were already wet, her father's lips trembling between pride and disbelief. Near them, Evelyn sat beaming, whispering to a critic beside her. She's not just playing notes, and she's rewriting her story. And in the front row, surprisingly, sat Daniel Cross. He hadn't come for attention or redemption. He came quietly, dressed simply, no entourage, no arrogance. Since that night, he had changed his ways. He'd donated to music programs, supported scholarships for underprivileged students. The first of those scholarships carried Leah's name. He watched her play, unmoving, his face unreadable until the music reached its peak. The thunderous, soaring climax that had once turned a restaurant into a cathedral. His eyes glistened, not with guilt but gratitude. Leah didn't see him at first. She didn't need to. The music was her voice, and tonight it spoke for her. As she reached the concerto's final passage, her hands moved faster, her expression serene yet fierce. The orchestra behind her swelled in perfect harmony, every instrument breathing with her rhythm. Then the last chord rang out in strong, pure final. For a heartbeat, the entire hall froze in reverent silence. Then came the applause. It began as a murmur, then surged like thunder. People rose to their feet, all of them. Some clapped, others cheered, others simply stood in awe. Leah bowed once, graceful and calm, though her heart raced. She looked into the crowd, and for the briefest second her eyes met Daniel's. He rose too, clapping slowly, his expression open and sincere. No words passed between them. They didn't need any. After the performance, backstage, Evelyn found her again. You did it, she said, pride shining through every syllable. Leah laughed softly, the sound light and unguarded. We did it, she replied. You gave me a chance to start again. Evelyn squeezed her hand. No, my dear. You took it. Later that night, Leah stood alone in the now empty hall. The lights dimmed, the echoes fading, leaving only stillness. She sat once more at the piano and let her fingers rest on the keys. No audience this time. No applause. Just the quiet hum of possibility. She whispered to herself. Music doesn't need permission. It just needs to be played. And in that simple truth lay everything she had fought for. Leah Morgan, the woman they once overlooked, had become the sound no one could ignore. The woman who'd been forced to play for mockery, now played for the world, and the world finally was listening. Months passed, and the ripples of that night at the Grand Aria Hall reached far beyond its walls. Leah's performance had gone viral. A recording captured by an audience member had spread across the internet like wildfire. Headlines called her the waitress who silenced a billionaire. Articles dissected every moment of that night, replaying the story that had become modern legend. But Leah didn't chase the fame. She chased the music. She played city after city, Boston, Chicago, Paris, Tokyo, each performance carrying the same sincerity that had awakened her life. Every note reminded her of the person she once was, the one who almost gave up, the one who found her way back. She donated half of her earnings to fund music scholarships, insisting they be given to students working service jobs while studying, those who knew what it felt like to balance survival and art. She wanted them to believe that talent didn't die in the shadows. It just waited for light. Daniel Cross kept his promise too. His foundation quietly funded instruments for schools across the country. He never sought credit, never attached his name. When journalists pressed him about that night, he said only one thing: I deserved to be taught that lesson. Then one evening, A year after her rise, Leah received a letter. Thick paper, her name written in delicate handwriting. Inside was an invitation. The International Virtuoso Gala, Vienna. Only the world's best were invited, those whose performances left audiences changed. Her name sat beside legends she'd once studied in textbooks. Leah held the letter for a long time before whispering, "It's time." When the night arrived, Vienna shimmered under the glow of streetlights. The concert hall was a cathedral of sound, every inch soaked in history. As Leah stepped inside, she felt both small and infinite. The grand piano on stage seemed to breathe in anticipation. Backstage, her hands trembled slightly. Not from fear, but memory. Of long nights waiting tables, of soft laughter that once tried to break her, of the sound of her own defiance rising from those keys. The stage manager nodded. "You're on." She walked into the light, greeted by silence. The audience didn't know her story, not fully, but they could feel it in the air, that something extraordinary was about to happen. Leah sat at the piano, inhaled deeply, and began. This time she didn't play Rachmaninoff. She played something new, her own composition, one she'd written over a year of rediscovery. It began softly, fragile as breath, then grew into a cascade of emotion. Joy, sorrow, resilience, forgiveness. The piece told her story without a single word. The melody carried echoes of that restaurant, of the laughter that once burned, of the applause that had healed her, of the humility that followed. The notes climbed higher and higher until it felt as though the music itself was standing up to speak. By the time she reached the final passage, tears shimmered in the eyes of strangers. And in that audience, halfway back, sat Daniel Cross, quietly, respectfully. He had flown across the world to hear the woman who had once been his lesson. When Leah struck the final chord, the hall erupted in applause. But she didn't stand right away. She let the sound wash over her, eyes closed as if letting go of the last remnants of her old life. Then she rose, bowed once, and smiled. It was the smile of a woman who had nothing left to prove, only music left to share. After the performance, as she stepped off stage, Daniel approached. He waited until the others moved aside, then spoke softly. "You were magnificent," he said. Leah looked at him for a long moment, then replied, "So were the scholarships." He smiled faintly. "They're yours now. The foundation bears your name." Leah shook her head gently. "It doesn't need my name. It just needs hope," he nodded. "Then that's what it'll give." For the first time since that night in the restaurant, there was no tension between them. No bitterness. Only understanding. The arrogance that once defined him had been replaced by humility. The doubt that once held her had turned into strength. As she left the hall, Vienna's night air was crisp, carrying the faint echo of applause still drifting from the doors behind her. She looked up at the sky, where stars hung like scattered notes across a velvet score. She whispered to herself, "This is what music was meant to do." And in that moment, she understood every humiliation, every struggle. Every late night and early shift had been a verse in the greater song of her life. The world had once forced her to play as a joke. Now it waited in silence for her next note, and this time, she played for everyone who'd ever been told they weren't enough. Because the truth was simple. Every soul carries a melody. And sometimes, all it takes is one brave moment to make the world listen.